So in this session, I want to talk about scales, and there are a few specific advantages to knowing and learning your scales. Basically, when you select a note, doesn't matter which note, you know that there's always a numeric sequence attached to that note. And with a major scale, there's the 7 notes, and then the first original root note repeats itself at the end. So the 8th note is basically the first note, just at the next higher, or the octave that's above that. Okay. When you practice your scales in all 12 keys, which you will, and there are chord books and things that lend itself to that. You can learn all the scale types, majors, minors, blues scales. We'll probably touch on that a little bit later. But the trick to this is, if you're just learning one major scale, it is the building block for the rest of the scales. And what do I mean by that is, if we're using C major, if I were to go to the right and sharp that note, and I go up 1/2 step, okay, to the very next key, all the sequence of all the movement that I just did, it repeats itself, and every note, so what was once C now becomes 1/2 step higher. It's as simple as that. So all the movements down here, they get all pushed up 1/2 step higher. Okay, so with that in mind, all you do now is apply that 1/2 step to the corresponding note, to the next note in line. So basically what happens now is your scale gets pushed up in 1/2 steps. Okay, so that becomes your movement. So what was C is now C sharp, and what is C sharp becomes D, and so on. So it's a really interesting and neat way that the scale transforms itself. I'll go C through F or G and possibly A. We'll just do some major scales here. And again, when you do all of your scale work, just remember those increments in 1/2 steps, and you just apply that same concept as you move up, and you'll be able to do all 12 keys no problem. With that, we're going to start in C, and we'll do it rhythmically. So again, double time. And just stop right there. What you want to still remember in that movement is not just the names of the notes, but the number, the numeric sequence in our major scale. So for C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C again, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so when I speak of in terms of a root note, root is always the original note. It's the first note that you're using in not just a major scale, but the triad of that chord. And we'll talk more about what a triad is, but it's always lined up sequentially as the first note. Okay, so we're talking scales here. We're doing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So every note has a scale attached to it, alphabetically and numerically. Very, very foundational. You always want to remember that. So that'll carry you a long way futuristically. So we'll go over C again, and then I'll move up, and I'll transition to the next ones as we go, and we'll just do them all in time, and then you can take this back and utilize it in your practice times, okay? So here we go. Just regular time. Double time. Okay, and we'll move on to the next scale, which is D. So that's D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Okay, so we'll do it in time. Again. And don't forget to train your ear to the different sounds of the notes, okay? Always keep in mind that this isn't just for, you know, the visual part of playing, or, you know, like scale and chord memorization. It's really important that somewhere along the way, it's as hard as it might seem, just to, even if you just expose yourself to the idea of melodies and, you know, and pitch, and you might not even be a singer, but nonetheless, you should always try to train your ear, because, you know, there's nothing worse than a tone deaf musician. I mean, you might as well just hang your hat up if that's the case, because you're going to have a difficult time relating to musical movements and sound in general. So that's it's an important thing that you should strive to really train yourself on, are those pitches and individual changes in your own private practice time, okay? So once again, D in time, and then I'll stop it, and then we'll go through the remainder of the chords, okay? Moving on, and we'll do E major. Moving up to F. All right, now G major. And we'll finish things off with A major. So definitely, you know, learn those major scales and put some thought into what you're doing. and break up your practice times a little bit. You don't always have to do major scales in, such a formal way. Um, Maybe just start to do different days of the week where you incorporate doing them in the sense of an octave. So just hold down the octave of whatever note you're on and then walk it up, do that major scale forward and backward. You can also, incorporate the idea of using your left hand. I am a right-handed person, so it's my dominant, that's my strength here. So if you're left-handed, it might be a more of a challenge for you to learn. I know when I learned guitar, my left hand, it basically controls the movements of all the chord work. So on a guitar, um, you all the things that I wasn't accustomed to doing, all the movements that seemed pretty awkward, eventually they became pretty fluid. So I think right-handed or left-handed, there's always a way that you learn to compensate so that you become more fluid in what you're doing. So yeah, just make sure, incorporate all those different aspects of learning your major scales, forward and backward, up and down. Remember the increments, what we talked about, and don't be shy. Definitely incorporate the different ways of using the scale, not just like sequentially, but use those octaves too, and break out of that. Definitely want to incorporate all that in your practice times.